Why do you coach? Welcome to the Nick Anthony Show. I'm Anthony.
And I'm Nick.
Hey, Nick. How are you today?
I'm fantastic, Anth.
That's great.
Well, hold on. Before I tell you how I am, you know, I realized in how long we've known each other, and we'll get into that, but how I call you Anth sometimes, and I've never asked you, is it okay that I abbreviate your name sometimes? Because I do that.
So I didn't know this was coming up, but no, it's fine. I'm fine with nicknames. I will tell you though, this might be a weird thing, but if you ever call me Tony, it doesn't even register.
Okay.
Like nobody in my mom, nobody ever calls me Tony.
I would. Right. I've never looked at you as Tony.
So you know how you hear your name across the room, right? If you
Yes.
say Tony across the room, it doesn't even register as me.
All right.
But yeah, Ant's fine. I've been called a lot worse than that. Believe me.
Anyway, this is exciting, right? I mean, this is a project we've talked about for probably 3 years, or we've talked about a project and then kind of settled on something more in a year ago or something. But we've known each other about 9 years. I think it's 9 years, right?
2017, 16, 17. End of 16, beginning of 17.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I remember.
I'm more memorable. I get that. That makes sense to me. But we met. I mean, we're going to get into this episode that we're going to talk about, or this subject we're going to talk about, is something that I think really sets a foundation of what this show is going to be about going forward. We met, a while ago, right? And we've talked about this for a while. We've gone through iterations. We were on Zoom trying to figure out things. But now look at us. We're kind of in a studio, which is pretty cool. We have actually. I don't know if we've made it yet, but we are starting a amazing journey, and we've had so many conversations, so many of them at restaurants, at bars, going through a lot of things, and we just have a lot in common.
Many at bars.
I was going to hold off on the bar thing, but they're just really exciting to be here with you and the crew. To get through, and I think this episode that we will affectionately call and PKE is such a foundation for us, and I love it. But I do think it's important to talk about how we met,
right?
Which because I think that does kind of tell a little bit of a story in itself. And so Anthony was introduced to me. I'm the deputy athletic director at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And Anthony was introduced to me by an alum who he was working with in his business as a business coach, and I took a meeting. Kind of the alum wanted to. I think he wanted to help, and he thought that Anthony's skills and services would help us in athletics, and turns out it did. He did. And so that led our friendship, but Anthony was able to kind of frame a lot of things for me in my job. I mean, I think I knew a lot of things, but I never knew how to understand what I was doing and how I was doing it until Anthony helped me frame a lot of my thoughts. And when I say frame, it was, organize my thoughts. I think I did things without knowing I was doing them, but to do them consistently, and to when I veered out of different things, out of different decisions, I would know why, and Anthony helped me really understand that. So
I think you're jumping ahead. I think
you do.
Because I think there was a long time where you didn't want help, and I couldn't see
either.
Absolutely,
you're right. I did jump ahead.
I couldn't see how I could help you.
Yes.
And you didn't see how I could help
yes,
you.
I'm very resistant.
Right. The alumni was a client of mine, and I wanted to be helpful to him, and I believe him. He's a smart guy, and I believe in his vision and all
Yes.
that kind of stuff. He's the CEO of a company that I work with. And, but I think you were the same way. I think you were only being polite to me because this alumni wanted you to be nice to me.
That is 100% true.
So you kind of like jumped over like a
Yes,
few
I
months
did.
of like.
I did. You're right. I was. I am not the one. I'm not. I've never been one. Maybe it's because of different factors in my job, but I would say I'm not overly. I'm resistant to sometimes the outside type of influence, and so I was polite, and I would say a combination of me, the right timing. We were in a place that we needed something different. I think I felt that. I think I knew that. And then Anthony's persistence. It wasn't persistence. I'm joking. You're going to get defensive, but
Yeah,
but I do think it was just kind of let's call it diligence. I think you started maybe to figure out just in a couple conversations, maybe I can help them.
For me, it was more. My version of the story is it was more dramatic than that.
I love this.
Well, so I was coming. So I thought I couldn't help you. It's like I was a business coach.
Yes.
Right? That's what I am. I help executives. I help businesses do things better. Right. Whatever it is, and that's what I was all about. Right. And that's what I was. I didn't think I could help you at all. I know very little about athletics. Right. I'm a fan of things. I played sports. I've done things, but that's totally different at the college level or even any organized high school level. I didn't think I could help you at all, but I was coming back from a swim. I had swam.
I can't wait to get into this, by the way. Go ahead.
It was from the South Island of New Zealand to the North Island of New Zealand,
Yep.
right? The two major islands, right? But I was coming back. So I was flying a flight back from Wellington. It was like 30 hours. I don't even remember now, but multiple flights, multiple transfers or layovers, all that kind of stuff. But I was exhausted. It was near the end of the flight that was about to land in LA, and I was just exhausted. I was so tired. I couldn't read anymore. I couldn't think anymore. I was so tired I couldn't even sleep anymore. So I just turned on what American Airlines had, and it was, I can't remember, it was one of those football shows, Hard Knocks.
Hard
or
Knocks.
something like that. Right?
Yep.
I'd never even watched one
Yep.
ever before, right? I'm a fan, but I'm not a fan. You know what I mean? I'm not a fan.
You were desperate to have some.
I was just like, and I didn't have a lot of time left, so I couldn't even put on a movie. It had to be something reasonably short. There was only like an hour left. So I put on this thing. It was Hard Knocks. I never watched it before. And there's this one scene where the head coach is talking to the starting quarterback, and the starting quarterback is asking for help. Now, this head coach, in my mind, right, he's got one of the 32 most coveted jobs in all of sports, right? I mean, there's probably some bigger, soccer, football coaches somewhere, right? But those are coveted jobs, right? So, and this coach could not speak. He could not communicate to his quarterback. The quarterback was begging for help, basically, and this guy couldn't articulate the things that he needed to articulate to help make the quarterback better, right? He just couldn't do it. So that's when it clicked on for me. It's like, I don't know what it is I can do to help Nick, but if that guy at that level couldn't communicate, then I know there's some way for me to help Nick.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so to me, it was like a switch. I was like, no. Oh, yes. I don't know what the yes is, but it was a yes.
Well, so let's talk about.
But then did it lead to anything?
I mean, sure. No, it did. Of course it did. I mean, we wouldn't be sitting here if it didn't. Yeah, I mean, it led to us winning 4 championships or 3 championships, but going to 4 NCAA tournaments and believe me, I'm not the coach. The coach is. I didn't coach these teams. You didn't coach these teams, but our interactions created a plan that we put forward. I mean, that we put in action, and it really helped us. And I think it helped the coaches. I never fully, put this out and said, you have to do this, you have to do that. But it changed my interactions with them. It changed the language I used. It changed kind of a little bit of the goals or even how they did things. I think just through my influence of our conversations and the plan we had put together. So and that leads us probably to what the essence of a lot of those conversations were. Not the I mean, not a huge part of it. And you and I have had this not this conversation, but a conversation about this topic so much over our friendship. And that is PKE. And I say that, but it's not fair for me to go any further until you go through what is PKE and why and how did you come to frame this and believe in it.
Well, all right. So thank you. So PKE came about. When I was 54 years old, I achieved a lifehood dream, swimming the English Channel. Right. I had always wanted something in the Channel from the time I was a little kid. I finally did it. Right. And so from there, I ended up doing a keynote. So there's a keynote that I do that is it's kind of like life lessons from marathon swimming kind of thing. It uses marathon swimming as a metaphor. It really helps you try to achieve whatever dream that you have. But and I've done it in Europe. I've done it in the United States. I've done it around different places.
The keynote, but
yeah.
Also some swims.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still, yeah.
We've been in New Zealand already. Go ahead. Now we're in England. So go ahead.
Right. So, but in that keynote, at the end of like almost every one of the first 6, 7, 8, whatever it was that I did, people would ask me how much is mental and how much is physical. It was like on everybody's mind. And I used to make this joke that said, well, if you knew how much it was mental, it wouldn't be mental. And that it went over just like that did with you just now. It's like 99% of the.
Well, it gave me a second, even though we've talked about this.
Right.
It actually made me pause. Like, oh yeah, that's right. Go ahead. That makes sense.
Well, but it's not funny, and it doesn't really capture you, and it makes you think. But it's not. It doesn't work, right? I mean, people laugh at me more than they laugh with me when I say it. But it made me think more about what I did. Right. And because I had, 1,000 things, and I'm making up 1,000 when I say it, that made me ready to attempt to swim the English Channel when I was 54 years old. And so I broke it down and I realized it wasn't just physical and mental. And physical has a bunch of parts to it, right? There's speed, stamina, strength, all that kind of stuff, right? There's a bunch of things in physical. But then what goes on in your head, everybody culturally, at least, everybody I talk to, athletically, everything I watch, every sports commentator I hear, it's like whatever's going on in the head is just like one thing, right? They call it mental strength. They call it, they call it whatever. But really, it's two things. And I worked on different things to make the two things better. And one is the K in PKE is knowledge. You have to know how to parallel a boat in the middle of the night, right? When it's dark out, you can't see anything else except the boat. It sounds easy, but it's hard. But you have to have the knowledge to know how to parallel a boat at night because these swims are so long, you're swimming in the dark. Yes. With
knowledge I don't have. Go ahead.
But then there's the emotional side too, right? It's like, how are you constructed emotionally in order to swim in the dark at night? And there's a whole bunch
Again, I do not have that either. Go ahead.
But those are different things is my point. And so there's different things that you do to make yourself emotionally stronger. And I contend that that's true for every sport. And actually, I contend it's for all parts of your life, right? There's the physical. Can you physically do what you're trying to do? Do you have the knowledge to do what you're going to do? And then do you have the emotional strength to do, or characteristics or traits to do what you need to do?
Yeah.
And they're different depending on the job or the role or whatever that you have. It's different. So that's PKE in a nutshell.
So talk about how we applied that to my work, and I mean, and I guess a little bit of just how we apply it to, this is coaches and sports and athletes. This, that was your marathon swim, which I joke about a lot, right? I mean, you and I have joked about it. I just said it. It's unbelievable what you did and do, and the emotional, skills that it took. The physical, off the charts. Like, I mean, I think any of us or anyone listening is in awe of that. of a lot of the physical. The knowledge, I think probably people of what you've done, okay, maybe you can teach yourself and learn that stuff. And I joke, I don't have it, but I don't have it. A lot of it is just, I'm not in the world, right? But I think, the physical in itself is just, I think, off the charts for someone like me who stood in goal and got balls shot at me, rather than
Nick was
swimming.
a D1 lacrosse goalie, by the way.
I mean,
yeah.
loosely. And then, but the emotional part, I don't think, again, I think that's what led you to PKE so much, as you just said. For me, it highlights it, swimming in the dark for however long. I mean, I have trouble, sitting in the dark for that long, right? What's going through your head and how to deal with all the stuff, whether it's how hungry you are, how tired you are, what is gnawing at your feet as you're swimming. I mean, that is fascinating to me.
You make a joke, but
I know. I mean, believe me, I know. Make a joke, and you've shared a little bit of those.
Oh no, there was
things.
a guy off of Catalina this week that got nibbled on.
Yeah, is that enough to not stop you from doing this? I mean, to me, that
So we'll go into that a different day.
All right,
yeah.
so let's apply it to coaching and to athletics.
So I say the first thing, right, to go back to your question, I think the first thing is just awareness, right? Because you can recruit differently. You can coach differently. You can do things differently depending on people's E, right? And so if you think about some of the greatest athletes or some of the best bosses you've ever had or whatever, I contend it's their E that really differentiated them the most. Yes, you have to be physically able to do the job, and you have to have the knowledge to do the job. But the good to the great or the mediocre to the good or whatever, I contend most of that is inside the E. And so, like I said, right, I know a guy, and I'm not going to talk about marathon swimming all the time, but I'll start with a bad example, right? This guy called me for help, months before his swim. I tried to encourage him to go swim at night, practice, and he was like, no, I can do it, and that kind of stuff. Well, he didn't last an hour. Catalina is an island in
so he's human. Go ahead.
Catalina is an island in Southern California, and you start that swim at midnight because you're trying to get in before the afternoon swells pick up, right? So you start at midnight. So you're swimming. Most of the swim is in the dark, right? And so he knew how to parallel a boat, right? So that wasn't a big adjustment for him, and he was in shape. He could physically do it. He could have, he did all the pre-work that he needed to do and all that, but he just couldn't handle swimming at night. He freaked out. He tried to stop at half an hour, and then he pulled himself out in an hour. And his crew was trying to talk him into staying in the water and to tough it out. And he grabbed the boat, and once you touch anything, those swims are over. So, but then on the other end, you look at somebody like, and I hate to bring up this guy. I'm not the world's biggest fan. You see him everywhere all the time anyway. But, Tom Brady. Yeah, sorry. But
I thought, you're from San Francisco area. Like, wouldn't you bring up Joe Montana?
Well, actually, Brady's from San Francisco Bay Area.
Oh, okay.
He went to Sarah High School.
All right.
But anyway, but that's all. Yeah. So, but he wasn't a physical specimen, right? Coming out of college, he wasn't anything, and his knowledge of the game was great, but that wasn't really a differentiator. Even though now you see all kinds of clips of him, working with Belichick on kind of stuff when he was a player with the Patriots. But he was so determined to make it, right? That's why he became physically stronger as he got older. That's why he was able to play so long, because he was so determined to get better. He just had that internal emotional drive to become better. So you can be a 6th-round pick and then end up winning 7 Super Bowls, right? Yeah. And so, but that was E. So I contend that's his E. And I swear what broke that swimmer was his E. He could physically do it. He had the knowledge to do it. He couldn't handle an emotion. Brady was okay physically.
He was a 6th-round pick, I think.
He was a 6th-round pick. Yeah. He was physically okay. His knowledge was okay. But what had made him different was really his E. You think about another, example of E breaking, right, under pressure.
Yes.
And, we're here in Philadelphia, and it's easy one he gets talked about a lot, but is Simmons.
Ben Simmons.
Ben Simmons. Sorry, I can't believe I blanked
Don't worry,
his
the
name.
Sixers have had many. So,
That's true.
So Ben Simmons is.
Yeah,
There's another one that
the
was
Sixers
pretty.
could really use
Yes.
this system. It would
Yes.
help them a lot, actually. But he's a physical beast, right? Ball handler, 6'10", could rebound, play every position, right? He's physically a beast, right?
Yeah.
He'd been playing basketball since he was a little kid. Tons of great coaching, right? Everywhere, right? He had all the basketball knowledge, but at a critical moment in a critical game for the Sixers and for the city of Philadelphia and everything, right? That pressure kept him from dunking the ball at a very critical time, and they ended up losing that game and losing that series. And I don't want to say primarily because it takes everything, but that was a critical moment at a critical time. So that's E, right? And so you have to. So if you're the coach, right, to back to your question, it's just having awareness around those things. So for somebody that's a coach, you have to look at their physical attributes, you have to look at their knowledge, and you have to look at their emotional strength as things that you have to work on all three of those things. You can't say, oh, that's just in his head and blow it off. I mean, Nick, tell me if I'm wrong, but and I'm sure there's somebody out there somewhere doing it, but I haven't seen it where, in the NFL Combine, they go out and they measure hand size, they measure vertical leap, and they measure the 40 time, right? They measure all these physical characteristics, right? They have ways to measure their knowledge, right? But they don't have systematic ways to go out and measure people's emotional strength. And
I think they have more. I think they try. I think, there's famously when I was at the Eagles, the Giants had this huge, long test that they would give. I say test, it was, a bunch of questions, et cetera. And I think probably the intent was that.
Okay.
But I still, and we see it all the time, I still think it kind of gets tucked away, either without a system, which I would say most, to your point, do not have. But I also think it's the sexiness of the size and the speed and the strength it's like, how many quarterbacks in the league get drafted because of that? And they have no career, right? They're first round picks,
right.
and then all of a sudden they're not in the league in 3 years. And there is no doubt the reason they are a first round pick is they're physical, and they can get away with it probably in college because of how physically superior they were.
Right.
But then they get to the NFL and that they're not physically superior anymore. So I think it's over and over again is the mistake made in the NFL with quarterbacks. Highlight all of them. I mentioned Joe Montana. He was a second round pick. He was, I don't think anyone really expected Joe Montana to be Joe Montana, but you want to talk about cool under pressure and everything. Joe Cool. Mm-hmm. And that in itself was amazing. And I think those underdrafted, underevaluated athletes, especially, have the high E. The reason they succeed.
Right.
We'll be right back to the Nick Anthony Show.
Today's show is brought to you by Rio the Film, available for free on YouTube. Access the documentary at www.riothefilm.com. That is RIOthefilm.com. Watch the inspiring true story of swimming the most iconic marathon swims in South America. www.riothefilm.com.
Welcome back to the Nick Anthony Show.
Well, the physical is the easiest thing to see, right?
Yes.
Measuring knowledge gets a little bit harder. Trying to figure out how to deal with the E is even harder. But you're going back to older football, right? You go, think about Ryan Leaf.
Yeah.
That guy, nobody even thought about it at all, apparently, right? It wasn't even on anybody's radar. He was, I can't remember what pick he was, but he was really high up. And so, but there was some, I think you've told me before, there was some debate.
It was Peyton Manning and him, and it was like, who are the Colts going to take?
Right.
Blah, blah, back and forth.
Right. But then he was like one of those guys who's oh my gosh, right?
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. And then there was also another guy back, I don't know if it was in that era or not, but being from the Bay, right? What was his name? the quarterback, the Raiders.
Jamarcus Russell.
Yes.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So same thing for him. They put a ton into him. They bet a ton on him. They placed the markers on it, all that kind of stuff, right? And oh my gosh, total bust,
Yep.
right? Total meltdown.
Yep.
So it's just really amazing to me because there's billions in the NFL. There's billions of dollars at stake on these, whether you win or lose, and how you do, and franchise value, and all that kind of stuff. And there's there's a there's a systematic way to measure physical attributes.
Oh yeah,
right?
definitely.
And there's some stuff around knowledge and intelligence. There's some stuff around ethics and,
Character, they call it.
character, those kinds of things. But there's not really, that I've seen anyway, in any sport, measurements or lesson plans, or how do you make them better at E? How do you make them stronger at E? And I contend that you can make them stronger at E.
Yeah.
And that's, we're talking a lot about football, but I mean, we did talk a little bit about basketball, but basketball too. I mean, it's just like you say, college coaches all the time, make the players practice with noise going, right? The speakers playing, that kind of stuff, right? But that's still not attacking the E. That's learning how to deal with the noise. I contend that that's a knowledge thing more than it's a emotional thing, right? So can somebody, forget all the noise for a second? They block out the noise, but can they still handle shooting a clutch free throw at a critical point in a game? And I contend that you can even do stuff to make them better ready for that in practice.
Yeah.
I mean, instead of just playing the noise, you have to have some kind of punishment. Like it's like your team, if you don't make these next, 8 out of 10 or 9 out, whatever the number is, right? If you can't do this in practice right here and now, right this very moment, then your entire team has to run lines.
Yeah.
Right? You do stuff like that. That adds a little pressure.
Oh, no doubt.
That's right. Your whole team's counting on you, right? You do that. So it's three different things, right? Can they physically do? And I'm not going to do the form because you'll make fun of me, and I don't really know the form. But physically, do they know how to shoot a free throw?
Yeah.
If you're a coach, do they know how to shoot a free throw? How's their form? Do you like all that, right? Do they have the knowledge on how to execute every single time? Do they have knowledge to deal with the noise and those kinds of things? But then, are you doing things as a coach? And this, we've been talking about pros and college a lot, but this applies to Pee Wee football,
definitely.
Youth league basketball, everything, right? But are you doing things as a coach to help them get emotionally stronger, right? And that's
I would say that's a miss, in most coaching. I mean, I don't know, so I'll give you two of my examples that I really like in the E category. The one is that I think is strong, is aware of it, is Pete Carroll. He's the Raiders coach now. Had great success at USC and then Seattle for a really long time with the Seahawks. And one of his one of his core values, but it's his characteristics, is competitiveness. And so he would design, to your point about pressure and everything, he would design his practices, and everything they did there was a competitive element. He wanted to work on anyone's competitive nature and make it pressure, and that's who he was. He was self-aware, which I think is a huge E trait for a coach. He had the awareness and his self-awareness that that's who he is, and was able to stay in himself and be true to himself in the way he structured practice, right? And his organization. I mean, he led it that way. It was a core. There was others, but that one stuck out to me as his competitiveness. And then the other one I really like is Steve Kerr. I just think Steve Kerr's has such high E that when he took over the job, and then he's won, I think 9, 7, I can't remember, as a player and as a coach, NBA championships, and that's not by accident. That's who he is. I mean, he's a winner, and but he also, I think he recognized when he walked into the job what he needed to know to do the job well. They were pretty good. They had they had Steph already. I think they had the talent, and they were working on things. But he got them over the hump with his awareness and his competitiveness and his ability or openness to learn. And I think he did. One of the people he learned from was Pete Carroll. And I think, he got the best out of people, I think, and he still does. And I think that's why he's been such a winner. But I'd be curious, who comes to mind for you? What coach?
So you made a jump from players.
I did
to coaches.
Sorry, we can go back to
and that's
players if we
okay.
want.
But I think Steve Kerr's a great segue because what he did with Andre Iguodala was amazing, right? You took this superstar player, used to be a starter, right? And Steve Kerr was so good that he was able to get Iguodala to come off the bench as the sixth man, which was a huge benefit to their team. That they're really when the second wave came in, it wasn't a big drop off at all. So he convinced them that number 6 is almost as number, or might be more important. I don't know, right? Than being number 5.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And that's a big deal. That speaks to Andre Iguodala, and that speaks to Kerr's abilities to manage their ease.
Yes.
Right. I think but I think that's great. I think it really is greatly intermixed, right? And that is, as a coach, you have to manage your own E. You have to make sure that you have all the characteristics, traits to bring out the best out of your players.
Yep.
So you have to look at yourself the same. It's like, physically, I can do this job. Do I have the knowledge to do this job? And if not, I need to work on it, right? And then where am I on my own emotional characteristics and traits to bring the best out of my players?
Yes.
And then to recognize it in players,
Yes.
right? And then from there, you can do like lesson plans. Right. We've been talking about pros a lot, right? But I think that's a big deal when you select your players
Yes.
to look at those 3 things. But then once you have them, or let's say you're coaching, your neighborhood team or that kind of stuff, you can't really say I'm picking, Joey from down the street. I would think, you have your team set for you. Same thing with a lot of high schools. Same thing with a lot of club teams, right?
Yes.
You have who you have, so you have to work on all 3 of those things to make them better. And just to be aware of that's a very big deal. I worked with this one D1 soccer coach at one time, and we actually figured out a lesson plan for the year for lesson plan is not the right word, but for each player.
Yes.
Right? It wanted each player to be able to physically do these things by the end of the year. He wanted each player to know these things by the end of the year, and he wanted to work on these emotional things, right? Worked with another, D1 basketball coach, explain this idea to him, and he immediately got it, right? And so he's not the same for everybody, right? I mean, some people you want calm, some people you want amped up, some people you want this way, some people you want that way. And his example was he wants his rebounders to be, and rabid's my word, I can't remember what, intense, rabid, whatever word. He wants his rebounder to be focused on getting that ball. That's all he wants the rebounder to care about. That's what he wants. That's the personality he wants in that. But then he wants his point guard to be the opposite. He wants his point guard to be chill. He wants his point guard to be able to see what everything's, all 9 players or everybody's doing on the court all the time, everywhere, and be in control of the whole thing. So it's a different kind of E. So when we talk about E, there's not like a standard thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of,
Anthony, one thing we have to relate the E to you and your marathon swimming. You got to tell the story because I think it's crazy for me, and it's probably crazy is such a terrible term, isn't it? But it's probably it's amazing. Tell the story of the snow and getting ready for your marathon swims. I think this highlights the E, and I won't steal your thunder.
So before I got to make a distinction between all the marathon swims and doing the English Channel, because the English Channel was my boyhood dream, right?
Yes.
And so I woke up one day, I was almost 50 years old, and I'm like, holy schmoly, I'm running out of time. But I really...
Holy schmoly. Go ahead.
Whatever.
Yep, I love that.
But I really wanted to swim the English Channel in my life, but I knew I was running out of time because I was almost 50 years old. So... and living in Philadelphia has a little bit of a disadvantage because if you look, marathon swims, you don't get to wear a wetsuit. It's Speedo cap and goggles. That's what you get to wear, right? So you have to deal with whatever temperature the water is, right? So you have to get used to the cold. And if you look, both marathon swimmers, at least for one in the United States, or like in San Francisco, La Jolla, because the water temperature is about right. Up in Boston most of the year, even down in Florida, Tampa Bay, right? It's right during the winter. It's good training. We don't have anything like that, right? The right temperature here lasts about 2 weeks in the spring and the fall, but that's not enough, right? And there's not
That's
enough.
not good.
No, it's not. So I decided I had to get, it meant so much to me, I had to get my body used to being cold. And I just had to change my definition of cold. So for years, I literally, no matter how cold it was, no hat, no gloves, no coat, nothing. And then when it snowed, I would go out in the snow, and I have pictures, I can prove it, right? Flip-flops.
I want to see them.
Flip-flops.
I think everyone wants to see them. Go
I
ahead.
don't know about that.
Okay.
Flip-flops, shorts, and a loose fitting, not even a t-shirt, but a loose fitting shirt because I wanted as much cold air on me as possible. And the idea is that if I could change my definition of cold, I could handle cold water. And in fact, when I swam in the English Channel, it was 58 degrees, right? So I spent 13 hours in 58-degree water, and I got used to it by doing that. And so I didn't, and you think that's a physical thing, right? But it was hard. It was really, really hard because I was
Hard's
cold.
one way to describe it. Go ahead.
Hard, stupid, crazy, whatever you want to call me.
Good.
I don't care. But
You said it, not me.
my point is it meant so much to me as from the English Channel. I had the emotional fortitude to push through it because when I started, it was like 5 minutes in the snow in shorts, flip-flops, and a loose shirt, right? But then I got up to the point to where there was one day my neighbors were walking by. They were out walking their dogs. There was snow everywhere. The street had been plowed, right? And I was out there shoveling, and I ended up talking to them, and I didn't even realize it, but I was standing out there in 29-degree weather for an hour in shorts and flip-flops talking to my neighbors. And so that's when I knew I had changed my definition of cold. It's like, oh, I have this is pretty good at this point. But it happened because of E.
Yeah,
right?
no
Did
doubt.
I change
Yes.
my P? Yes. Did I change my physiology? Yes. I'm like hot, even like wearing a regular shirt now all the time. I hate wearing pants. I know that sounds crazy, but
Yeah. This is
so I changed
PG
my
show.
P because it meant so much to me.
Yeah.
That I had the emotional strength to push through that pain to get there. And I think that just applies to every sport. I think there's
Oh, no
things to
doubt.
do in every sport to make your players or make you as a player make your E stronger.
Yeah,
I
what
don't
is
know
that?
it
I
is.
mean, what is that for teams or
Yeah,
not teams
but that's
or
where you
athletes
sit
or
down.
anyone? Yeah, you're right.
Right. That's what I meant with the soccer coach I told
Yes.
you about earlier, right? I sat down with him and like we looked at player by player and figure out what situation, what do we need to do with them this season to make them better,
Yeah.
to make them stronger in E. So it's all three things. But just knowing that you have to work on all three is a big part of being a really good coach.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about coaches who are good. I think for me, it's probably, you asked me, right? I think locally, right? You can't beat Jay Wright. I mean, you just, for being calm and cool under pressure, like no matter what the situation is, up by one, down by one, you just win the national championship, whatever, right? He was always unflappable.
Mm-hmm.
And I would bet, and I don't know him, but I would bet that was intentional.
Oh,
That he
yeah.
taught himself how to exude calmness in every situation. Because we all want to be worked up. We all have natural instincts to be competitive and all that kind of stuff. And I know he's super competitive, but he was calm. Externally, he was calm.
Well, yeah, and I think Jay's even a great example of what you kind of referenced a little bit that you can work on E.
Right.
So I don't know, and this will be a great conversation with him, but is that the E with the play, there was a Nova player. Now they're the Nova Knicks, right? But did he recruit to E or did he develop the E? Because the one thing that was able to happen, probably in the pre-NIL years was that you could get old. Teams could get old in college, and he had the chance to develop them physically, knowledge, but also I would say that with Jay's high E, he was able to do that with his players throughout. The one example that I think, another example that's near and dear to my heart a little bit is Virginia basketball. So Tony Bennett, who retired a couple of years ago, right around when Jay retired, to me was just the one thing he did that he was an awesome coach, amazing. I think he's, at the time I thought it was he and Jay just did very similar things in developing teams and getting them older and being winners and having identity, all these things. But Virginia was the first number one seed to ever lose in the NCAA tournament to a 16 seed. That's unheard of, right? And what Tony, and again, haven't talked to Tony Bennett, what I think Virginia basketball did the entire offseason was work on E. They were the 1 seed. They had almost everyone back. And what was the difference between when they lost in the first round of the NCAA tournament to when they won the national championship the following year? It was all E. Whether he framed it that way, right, but he knew that was going to be the difference, is how is he going to work on their E to not only just in general get, right, kind of work on those skills, but also how is he going to get them to recover from what happened?
Right.
And he flipped the script and they won the national championship. So I just think, that a couple of those examples are amazing. We're talking basketball a little bit, but we'll get into other sports as well.
It applies to other sports. I mean,
it does.
You and I both know two coaches, wonderful people, right? Both of them just wonderful people who lost their jobs because they couldn't manage their own E.
Yes.
Right? They couldn't do it.
Yep.
Right. One guy was an event, right?
Yep.
One-time thing.
Yep.
The other guy was just a slow erosion of relationships inside the building.
Yep.
Right. And they ended up not being able to keep their job. But could they do the job? Absolutely. Were they students of the game? Were they have a ton of knowledge? Both of them, right, in their respective sports, knew the game's cold.
Yeah.
No doubt. The difference for them was the E. And I think, we're only talking about sports, but Nick, if you think about your best bosses in your life, right? If you think about that, I contend that it's their E that made them your best boss.
100%.
Right. And whoever your best boss is, right, it's their E. Because there's tons of people that can physically be the boss in most businesses, right? I mean, all kinds of shape, sizes, physical attributes, whatever. That's not the differentiator, right? Knowledge, right? There's tons of people out there with tons of knowledge and MBAs and all that kind of stuff, right? There's tons of knowledge out there. But the bosses that can get the best out of people, the bosses that can be cool when there's a fire going on, but yet create urgency to get stuff done, the bosses that can, just work with just about everybody to bring everything out, those are the best bosses. And those are all E characteristics.
No doubt.
And so this E that we're talking about today is not just a differentiator in sports for your players and not just differentiator in sports for you as the coach to look at, but for everybody, your entire life, the whole part of your life, E is the differentiator.
Yeah, 100%. I think, every time we talk about this, Anthony, I get more excited to talk about it more. Isn't that funny? I can't wait for, we're going to run out of time at some point, these guys are going to kick us out of the studio at some point, but we could literally talk about this often. And I think we will as we go through episodes, and we'll break it down, because I think as we've, if we started to do, we've hinted towards words of awareness or resiliency or, leadership and in all these different traits. Right.
Right.
And but we're going to dive into this, and we're going to dive into your marathon swimming, which again, I just think highlights a bunch of these different E, but it really, it's changed the PKE just framework. It just has changed the way I look at sports. And life probably a little bit, but it highlights how I do things a lot, and the messaging I give to coaches is basically, what are you looking for in a recruit, and in my job, like specific to my job, but is it, what's the most important thing? Is it competitiveness? Is it leadership? Is it any of the different awareness and et cetera? Is it what are those things that come to the top of the list, and then recruit to that and try to create a team of that, so that that becomes your culture. It becomes your culture. Yeah, you might have an identity of being, the fastest. You want to have physical skills that you want to make sure your teams have, but you also, maybe more critically, you want to make sure you have the emotional skills, and you want to know when you go outside that. Maybe you do take a shot on a recruit that is just a monster, just huge, fast, And at least you're aware, if you have high E, that, oh, I stepped out of it a little bit, but I know I stepped out of it, and our culture can handle that type of, and we can work and develop the E. So I think it's all those things in a sense. But I do think it's just something we're going to talk about. And
we have talked about it a ton, right?
Yeah.
This is how many.
And I'm never tired of it, but go
Right,
ahead.
no, it's how many
Maybe
conversations
everyone is
that we
else
have,
now,
right?
but,
I mean, when we've talked about it in the past, right? We've talked about Shaquille O'Neal. We've talked
Yes.
about Carson Wentz. We talked about.
Yeah, we didn't get into them.
No, we didn't even talk about.
We
them
have to
today.
end it because I'm getting the.
I know.
You know,
I know, but that's just it. It's just really that my point of bringing that up is we've talked about it a ton, and it just really permeates everything. But it's just a way of thinking differently, very simply, right? It's just not saying mental. How much is physical? How much is mental? Right? That's just when you think about physical, you break it down. You've got to break down what's going on inside the player's head, inside your own head, and you got to make it two big giant things out of the gate. So it's physical. I got to work on the knowledge, and I've got to work on the emotions for myself, and then everybody that I'm responsible for. And as a coach, you're responsible for those players. And we'll talk about that in a future episode about how important it is to be a coach.
Yeah. I mean, so important. PKE, it'll be a baseline for us and a huge topic. And maybe we change the verbiage of people where they refer to things as E. I know I do. I know you do.
You mean mental. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. But
No,
I think that's where we're going to go. And I'm really excited. So we're looking forward to many episodes of being with everyone. Excited to sit and talk with you each episode and between episodes and hopefully we can share a lot of things that can help people think differently, in PKE's probably the first of them.
Yep. Hope you had fun today. I did.
I always do.
All right. Thanks for joining us, the Nick Anthony Show.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see you. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching the show today. I had a great time talking with Nick, as I always do. Hope you enjoyed it as well. Visit us on social media. Also, go to our website if you've got comments, questions, you want to call me an ugly name, thenickanthonyshow.com. There's a place to do it there. Give us your email address so you never miss an episode. Thank you very much. We'll see you next show.